Well, first of all, I want to say good evening to all of you. Thank you for having me here, and thank you, Don, for the invitation. Um, I just want to start to say that it's quite a vast topic, and I had to make some choices, and obviously, we cannot cover everything tonight. But the fact that we're meeting in this way just says a lot on how technology has really become part of our lives. I would say, especially with COVID, there's been a really everything has been brought up even more to speed than how we use these technologies on our lives. But I also want to say that technology is actually nothing new in our lives. I mean, if you think of it, at first, I would say technological kind of invention, if we want, was Adam and Eve trying to cover themselves with clothes. Using leaves. So that's like it's using the technique, using an instrument for something that you wish to do. Uh, and if you think human hands, I mean, we've always been shaping tools, clothing
Right.
ourselves, cultivating the soil, hunting, gathering, building shelters and forming communities, traveling across lands and seas. So we are really we always been technological. It's in our nature. It's always been part of our lives. For example, in writing, if you look at the libraries, how they preserve memory. In medicine, the way that we're able to heal wounds and restore hope. Pat Brennan knows very well how that works, right? I mean, technology can, and the advancements that we have today is just unbelievable. Instruments. Think of music. You know, think of the presence. Like for example, can you imagine the first time that an organ was brought into a church? The scandal that was, and we I could go on and on and on. Yet we confess that that sometimes though these tools have not always been used in a good way. Think of weapons for wars. Thinks of systems that oppress, inventions that forget the poor. But also, I want to remind that Jesus himself uh, was a technician. Uh, the other day, the gospel, says this isn't he the son of the carpenter? Well, we translate carpenter, but the Greek word is techno. So a technician. So, and you think of Jesus, even the way, unfortunately, he died, a technological mean was used, a cross. And so, it's an object that was fashioned for death, used to punish, um, and yet he transformed. It was transformed by love into a sign of redemption and life. Tomorrow we celebrate the commemoration of the Passion of Christ, the title of our congregation. But think even of the apostles. How the fact that they had this mandate to preach to the ends of the earth and how they moved, in order for the gospel to be spread. Uh, Boats, roads, letters, languages, all to proclaim the good news. So, what is technology today? How do we use it? I'm just going to go through some images. I'm going to share them, and I'm not going to say anything, but just pause like a few seconds on each one, and I'm just going to scroll down until the slide will have something to say specifically. Let me share now. So, why this topic today? Before I start, I'd like to say that if anyone has any reactions on those images, I think that in each one you can find something positive and negative, to be honest. Um, and believe it or not, like a few months ago, I was actually interviewed by NBC about AI specifically and religion, and particularly the scriptures. And so one of the things that came out is yes, it's much easier, to find a passage or how to connect them with other passages into the Bible. And so, you can even like have it write prayers. But then I asked a question, for example, to the journalist. I said, "Well, would you ever ask AI to pray for you?" And he looked at me and says, "No, I would never want that." He kind of like surprised that I asked that question. Says, "You can have a most beautiful prayer written on earth, but." Maybe better written better than any human being, but do you think that it's praying? Does it mean that to have a prayer written, does that mean that it's praying? The last image that you saw was a priest, that actually someone was trying to use it almost like, to get a spiritual direction. So anyway, it's very interesting how AI is going to touch all our lives. But what is AI? Artificial intelligence and digital systems, they shape our daily life. Your phone, your tablet, your computer, um, even our cars. I mean, there is a little bit of technology in everything. And technology, I think the difference today is that it's no longer only a tool, but an environment. It's a living space. It is a reality. And for how much we want to always call it virtual, but it's real. People meet in this environment. People make decisions in this environment. People are gathered together. And is it an environment where we want to be present or not? And how do we want to be present? How do we prepare ourselves to be present in this environment? Ministry today unfolds inside digital culture and algorithm spaces. We have to just take that into account. And so I think the Passionist Charism asks how to live and promote the memory of the Passion in this environment, and where is the crucified in this world or in this environment. And we're called to see things through Passionist lens. Um, if we're called to keep alive the memory of the Passion, and because the Passion of Christ is not just an event of the past, I think still have to continue to use it on how to also use it as a key to read our reality and this reality. And one of the ways is, for example, how suffering is produced, hidden, or justified, or ignored within systems. I'll make a very simple example. I don't know for you, but if you start scrolling your phone and you start to, like, for example, on Instagram, you stop on a reel that for some reason it calls your attention. Then you see that if you continue to scroll, depending on how much time you're spending on that reel, they're going to come up other reels that are related to that without you even asking for it. And you see how there is a connection between those. Or sometimes we think that we're really free on the internet to navigate and go wherever we want. Uh, Technically, yes. De facto, not really. You're really not, we're not able to go wherever we want. We are kind of always guided because there are predictions, there are statistics that they are collected. And so you belong almost to a group. And to get out of that group, you have to like reset your phone, or you have to reset your ways of navigating. And even then, it's not guaranteed that you're gonna just be able to connect to anything. If you ever, for example, if you often use Google and you often use it always with the same I would say technological instrument, but also when you sign in, you'll notice that the first things that come out when you do a Google search, basically they're very limited. And if you want to continue to research, it's not just, how the way what you write and that you're asking for, but how you write the question and how you really want to dig in and what you really want to search for. And it's not always easy to have really any kind of answers. Um, as I said before, Jesus was a carpenter too, uh, shaped tools by tools, matter and time. He was an incarnated person. He was the incarnation. He became man. He lived in a precise moment, in a precise environment, and those shaped him too. Technology was part of his world. Roads, boats. I mean, you know from the Gospels how many times he used the boats and walking on the roads, opened the scrolls, seals, oral language. And like in his time and our time, these were not neutral. They shaped who could speak, who was heard, and how truth circulated. The apostles themselves, they work with the technological within the technological ecosystem too. Letters, messengers, communal readings, St. Paul's letters. Most of them are not private. It's not a private correspondence, but a technology of communion. And so even the Gospels, if you think of them, they're mediated testimonies shaped by memory, narration, and culture. Oh, sorry. But what about us? So I went to dig in a little bit for at least for the Passionists here in the United States on how these are not the only ways, but how technology has at a certain point been very present in our ministry. With the sign, I found this article of Father Rob Carbonneau on the in the Passionist Archive, and he started to dig through several things, especially in the archives in Union City, and he came up with this picture. I saw this of the sign, but even today, I'm thinking about not just the mass where you see Paul Fagan here with the Sunday Mass, but also like Cedric and and also our retreat houses, especially after COVID, how we use so much, and we still use these instruments to preach, to educate. Uh, what we're doing tonight is an example. How we're present on TV, so that is also very important. So keeping alive the memory of the Passion has always required mediation, and we always used it. So it's nothing new. Preaching, symbols, popular missions, narrative, presence. And today, the mediation should include the digital platforms, media systems, and algorithmic visibility. These are some of the examples that I just pulled up. I mean, there's so many other social medias where I talked to the one of this province. What we're doing tonight. This was done in Lent for the Lenten series on your top right. And then found this on Madre Dolorosa, the spiritual nourishment and the retreat ministry at Madre Dolorosa. And they're all possibilities that we're trying to use. But we have to know that there are no more instruments, as I said. We have to make that passage from thinking of them just as instruments, that they're actually environments where others are present. And today's technology, in fact, is different in kind, not just in scale. Digital technologies are environments we inhabit. Algorithms select, prioritize, exclude, and amplify. They shape what we see, as I was saying before, what we fear, what we desire, and what we believe is real. But what is AI? It's a system that uses algorithms, often very sophisticated, data-driven ones, to simulate aspects of human intelligence. Oh, sorry. But what is an algorithm? I'm going to try to, it's not easy to simplify, but I try to do my best here. An algorithm is a formal step-by-step procedure for solving a problem or making a decision. In computing, an algorithm receives inputs, data, applies rules or models, and produces outputs, results, rankings, predictions. Modern digital algorithms often use large data sets and rely on statistical models. And they're optimized to achieve specific objectives, accuracy, for example, engagement, profit. I'm sure that many of you, for example, use Google Maps or Waze, right? So if you noticed in these last, if you've been using it for, especially in the last, I would say, at least 5, 6 years, how more and more it's becoming accurate. Not only it's giving you alternatives, and if you notice, it's not because there's really a camera from in the sky, like I would say a drone that is telling them what is happening. It's because it's the more people are using, the more data it collects it, the more it processes, and the more it's able to predict. And even when algorithms learn from data, they do not understand, they never can understand meanings or values. This has to be very clear. Their structure, goals, and limits are defined by human designers and institutions, at least at this moment. So, what is an algorithm? It's a set of instructions that tells a system what to do next. Examples: a recipe for baking bread. As I said before, GPS calculating the shortest route, sorting names alphabetically, filtering spam emails. An algorithm does not think. It follows structured rules that are determined or predetermined. So, what is artificial intelligence then? It refers to systems designed to perform tasks that normally would require human intelligence, such as recognizing speech, voice recognition, for example, face recognition. When your phone, when we open it, before you just you have to digit the numbers or the password, and now you can just look your on your phone with your face, and there's a facial recognition. So it's recognizing, also identifying images, translating languages. If I don't know any of you, but for example, now if you're in an international meeting, we were in Pittsburgh, and some of our guys, when someone was speaking Spanish, they were using their phone that was on. It was just automatically translating what was being said. Generating text. For example, if you want to do, if you go on ChatGPT and you ask a question, it's going to generate something. AI systems rely on complex networks of algorithms. Modern AI often uses machine learning, which involves algorithms that learn patterns from data, improve performance over time. A Google map, for example, 10 years ago could never match what it does today. It adjusts internal parameters, and these are still algorithms, but they are designed to adapt rather than just follow fixed instructions. They start to calculate. Um, uh, anyway, my simple point is that they can do all these things. Um, and what is important is that to understand that AI is not magic. It is a it is structured logic and mathematics. And ethical concerns about AI often concern how algorithms are actually designed. They are never neutral. They're trained and they're deployed with a purpose. Bias in AI often comes from biased data used by learning algorithms. Has any of you, for example, ever asked ChatGPT who's the current pope? If you do not send it to the internet and say, go and search. So, for example, if you even just you type that Pope Leo the 14th, and you just you continue writing, and then you just hit the button return. It comes out says that the current Pope is Pope Francis, and there was a Pope 13th. Why? Because no one has put into the data, the initial data, that there is a new Pope. And so it continues to go on with that mistake. But it's not making a mistake. It's just following according the information that has been put in at the very beginning of its own reasoning. So algorithms do not think, judge, or care, although they can use very beautiful words when you're talking to one. They follow goals given to them, such as attention, profit, speed, or efficiency. But what about our ministry today? We know that the Passion of Christ reveals unjust mechanisms, political, religious, cultural. I mean, you just have to read, again, the Passion of Christ, and you see all that present. But how can reveal or at least discover and reveal the unjust mechanisms that are in the digital economic and algorithmic world today? So it's about unmasking systems that normalize suffering, giving voice to those rendered invisible. But that's not it, because we're not only covered to unmask, or also to promote. And what no algorithm can replace, in my opinion, is the fact that passionate ministry is not only about unmasking systems, it's about forming hearts. We teach people to pray, not just to read prayers or recite prayers. We teach people to meditate, not just to consume spiritual content. Podcast is just not enough. We teach people to discern, not just to follow recommendations. There's a temptation today, like for example, I mean, already there are people, for example, when they go to a physician and the physician, starts to give suggestions, people says, "Oh, I Googled this and this is what I think I have." But now with AI, even, people are just gonna say, this is what I was told. No matter, AI is the new God, the new truth that is going to reveal. There's a document that you'll see later with the Vatican says it's the new golden calf, to which we're all bowing. It's something that we built, and we built this golden calf thinking that's going to be a God. And it's almost the same thing. We were thinking that AI is this God that cannot make mistakes. And yet, if you ever use it, you'll see how biased it is and how many mistakes they are. But that's not the scary part because that is going to improve. It's going to have less and less mistakes. But when you think that it's unfailable, that is a big risk. And I also want to say something else regarding, the fact that usually it's always presented that it imitates the brain. Well, as human beings, we really do not know a lot of our brain as we think we do, and we're trying to imitate something that we do not have full knowledge of. So what's going to happen with that? We still don't know. So as I said, people pray and concern. No AI system can do that, but we can enter into this environment and help people to do it. AI can generate texts. It can summarize teachings. It can suggest prayers. It can write the prayer of the faithful. It can even write a liturgy if you want for you. It can even write a homily. But yet, it cannot pray. It cannot listen and speak to God. It cannot discern. True special guidance, and I'm sure you all know this because of also your ministries, is never a recipe done for all. True spiritual guidance is not just based on data. It's not just based on predictions. It's not just based on statistics. Those can help, yes. But each person is so unique, and God speaks in a unique way to each one. Sure, the way of sanctity for holiness is the same for other commandments, beatitudes, and yet each saint has its own charism. Even inside the same congregation, even inside the Passionist family, you have a Paul of the Cross, you have a Gemma, you have a Gabriel, you have a Maria Goretti, you have all these. Not one repeated what the other did. Each person is called to holiness in a unique way. Therefore, teaching prayer, meditation, and discernment is irreplaceable. This is where Passionist ministry remains essential and human. So, what is the criterion to navigate into this environment? How do we discern? The church social teaching lately is has been, especially with Pope Francis, with the famous the Rome call for AI ethics. Uh, since it's been a really a wake up, and it's very interesting that this time the church actually has anticipated others. Um, this was this Rome call for ethics in AI, where actually the Vatican was able to gather together the CEOs of Google, of Apple, OpenAI, Microsoft, and so many others. And it is a real concern. It's a concern for them too. And one thing that we should know is that technology has to be judged by its effects on the human person. And there's this term now that they invented. It's called algorithmics. Actually, a Franciscan. His name is Paolo Benanti. He's the one who came out with this term. Uh, Human dignity is ontological, received from God, irreversible, and no algorithm score, data profile, social exclusion can erase this dignity. There are two documents that I would suggest then for your own maybe to go in and if you haven't already to take a look at. And I think they're two, I would say, very important documents to guide us, especially in this new environment in which we find ourselves. One is the Dignitas Infinita on human dignity, which kind of repeats what we already see in Gaudium et Spes. That the inalienable dignity of the person, this dignity is not earned, it's not lost, it's not dependent on ability, on health, or productivity. It belongs to the person by virtue of being human. It is not granted by society, law, or technology. And an incarnate person in relation with others and the environment, that's what the human being is, and AI can never be that. And we have to know that everything is connected, and we are connected now, we like it or not. We are connected in and through this environment. And so dignity grounds human rights also. Every human right flows from inherent dignity, and no authority may override it. And what are the major threats identified in this document that are also related and through these new technologies that we're using? Poverty and exploitation, war and violence, human trafficking, discrimination, abortion, euthanasia, gender ideology, reduction of the body, technological reduction of the human person. These are things in the document. But think of this. The way, for example, there's so many. The way, for example, a lot of criminal organizations are using cryptocurrencies. You can't track them down. Without talking about the dark web that exists, but I don't want to go there because we're going to open a whole another another argument. Um, but think also the other threats, for example, that may come. Let's say we advance so much in medicine, especially in certain countries with AI, with technology. What's going to happen to the rest of the world? The way wars are conducted. It's not just a video game anymore, that there's a human being behind the screen, that is the screen. Now it's just all, we can arrive to a point that the human being is not going to be involved anymore in it. And so much destruction can happen without touching you. What does that mean? Also through these means of communication. Uh, on one hand, we thought that internet would have, um, all of a sudden uh, given access to knowledge to everyone, and we want to become better. My goodness, whenever you open social media or you ever or anything, I mean, the vitriol language is unbelievable. It seems almost like the ignorance is growing exponentially instead of going down. So there's a call to responsibility also with all this. So how are we defending the weakest in this situation? How are we trying to see who's being marginalized within this environment too? How to resist cultural and technological systems that reduce persons to objects? I always say this that, and don't get me wrong, I love pets, especially dogs, and I just love them. But I've been noticing more and more. So, if you saw the images, we going from an interrelational, I would say, an interpersonal relationship, and the dating sites that exist, for example, to match with someone, you have the Catholic dating sites and the others according to what you want to match. And it seems like once the algorithms tells you, who you should match, actually, you think that's going to be a successful marriage automatically in that sense. It's almost like you think that it's going to work the same thing with vocations. It doesn't work that way. We know that. But what is scary is the fact that it's already happening, that people are starting to relate with these tools. And when they're going to also become robots and androids, they're going to relate to them as their people, as their persons. And it's much easier. So you're going to isolate more and more yourself because you're going to build the other as you wish. And so what happens to freedom? What happens to growth? How do we overcome, for example, diversity? How do we overcome difference of opinions? And there's another document that just came out last year, actually, Antiqua et Nova, Human Dignity, Artificial Intelligence. Artificial intelligence says the document that must always remain at the service of the human person. Human dignity is inherent and not produced by intelligence or efficiency. AI is a tool, not a subject. And yet, a lot of people are already treating AI as it is a subject. Um, does any one of you, I think you have Alexa, or I can't remember the other ones. I mean, I've seen people literally talking to Alexa as it is a person. It's fascinating. And, you just have to stop for a moment and says, wait, what is happening here? AI is a tool, not a subject. Our responsibility always belongs to human beings, never to machines. It clearly distinguishes human intelligence, which is embodied, relational, moral, open to truth, goodness, and God. And it's totally different from artificial intelligence that is functional, statistical, instrumental, incapable of conscience. This is the real and fundamental difference. Incapable of conscience, therefore of freedom and of love. It can use loving words. It can say what you want to hear to be said to you. Yes, you can make those calculations, but it's incapable, at least now as things are, to fall in love, to make really a free choice. And a real relationship is based on free choice. Antigua Nova warns also against confusing imitation with understanding, replacing discernment with automation, delegating moral judgment to technical systems. And in this sense, the document safeguards prayer over production, discernment over prediction, and conscience over calculations. It reaffirms that no AI can pray, no AI can discern God's will, and no AI can replace spiritual accompaniment. Human dignity remains a living source, and AI must never become its measure. Now, if you all remember, when Laudato Si came out, it kind of gave the tools also for us to help understand better, I would say, the new situations that we find ourselves. Uh, One of the phrases that goes on and on and on in that encyclical is everything is connected. And the one underlying logic is efficiency over wisdom and control over care, the so-called technocratic paradigm. Digital systems, economy, ecology, and exclusion are all linked. And interecology asks us what really works, for whom it works, at what costs, and who suffers the most and says who's paying the biggest consequences. Um, because also the use of these instruments, they have an impact on communities and also so at a personal level, at a societal level, and also on the common home, the earth. And Pope Leo actually, in his first appearance with the cardinals, signaled AI as a challenge for humanity. When explained why he chose the name Leo was as following Leo XIII, who wrote the Rerum Novarum, the first social encyclical, and saying that we are today in a new industrial revolution. So the cross-human dignity and the human and ecological cost of AI. Uh, Artificial intelligence is not immaterial. It's true that AI is going to be on high speed. It's going to be able to process so much more data than we do. Probably like, the time that it took us, for example, to get and to arrive to to certain discoveries that we have today. For example, it took us to maybe 30 or 40, 50 years. Now, I probably can't do it in a matter of even less than half an hour. Sure. But what is the cost of all this? There are a few, for example, the few articles that I was reading recently, and one is at the level of medicine. There was this young girl in southern Italy who had this very rare disease, and sure enough, the physicians and the scientists through AI were able to process everything. And in a matter of, I mean, less than half a day, they were able to actually find a solution. But to make that cure, it would have costed more than $10 million. So you have the cure, but who can access it? There's a moral question there that already happens. And there are other examples that I can bring you. Yes, we have this high speed ability to process with these mega data centers, but the amount of power, and I would say translate into energy, that a human brain has to put into action is way much efficient and less than what any data center may have to use. So much that we know that a lot of data centers, like for example, a lot of companies have been received the permission to build their own power plants, to make and produce their own power. And what are the consequences of that? There are big ethical questions that come with all this. Artificial intelligence is not immaterial. It depends on rare minerals and extraction. And we know that these are happening, especially, in countries where, people are exploited. The use of water. Oh, the amount of water that is necessary. Cooling and industrial processes. So much, in fact, for example, why do we all think that, for example, we have eyes on Greenland? Do you think that it's only because of our safety in the sense of we're worried about Russia or China invading? It's a very cool space. China is already testing their data centers under the oceans, which is provoking, uh, the temperature of the waters to rise. There's a massive electricity demand. Data centers that require constant cooling, electronic waste, and toxical disposal. And these costs often fall on poor communities near extraction sites, workers in unsafe supply chains, regions with fragile ecosystems, and future generations who inherit the damage. But the dignity question is also directly human. AI-driven systems can exclude people through automated screening, manipulate attention and emotions through targeted content, marginalize groups through biased data and unequal visibility, silence voices by controlling what is amplified or ignored, rank lives by efficiency, profitability, or risk scores. That being said, though, there are a lot of good things that can happen with AI. Because, I mean, can you imagine if you're a physician, if you're an engineer, if you can predict, for example, an earthquake? There are a lot of things. So that's why it's important that the question of the human dignity remains at the center when we are using these instruments and when we're discerning on what the consequences will be by using it and how can we really help the common good. The crucified Christ reveals dignity beyond usefulness, productivity, visibility, and power. So, oh, sorry, I didn't want to do that. So I would conclude by saying, giving you questions. Where do you personally feel the effect of digital technology strongly in your life and ministry? In what ways has ministry already moved into digital environments? Not just using them as technologies, but the digital environment. How is suffering made visible or invisible through today's media? How does contemplation of the passion change how we read the cyber world? How can passionist ministry inhabit digital spaces without losing its soul? And what concrete practices could express the charism today in the cyber world? And I think that's about it.